The frigid wind cut through my bones as I stood on the sidewalk, clutching a single suitcase. The door behind me slammed shut, echoing the finality of my daughter's words. "You can't stay here anymore." I felt the weight of betrayal and rejection press down on my chest like an iron weight. Today I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. Before we begin, I'd be truly grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video and consider subscribing to the channel. It helps me keep sharing these stories with those who need them most. My name is Margaret, and for 67 years I've lived in Chicago. This sprawling city of steel and sky that once felt like home, but now feels like a maze of cold, indifferent faces. I remember standing outside my daughter's brownstone in Lincoln Park that December morning, my breath forming little clouds in the air, my fingers numb inside my worn gloves. The street was lined with elegant townhouses, their windows glowing warm with light, families visible inside preparing breakfast, children laughing. But I was outside, locked out, unwanted. The cold seeped through my coat, an old wool one I'd bought 15 years ago when money wasn't so scarce. I could hear the muffled sounds of traffic on the main boulevard, the distant rumble of the L train carrying people to work, to appointments, to lives that continued while mine had just shattered. A neighbor walked by with her dog, a golden retriever that stopped to sniff my suitcase. She smiled politely but didn't ask questions. In Chicago, people know how to mind their business. Or maybe she saw something in my face that warned her not to intrude on whatever tragedy was unfolding on the sidewalk. I had spent the last 5 years living in what my daughter Rachel called the guest room, a cramped space at the back of her house that smelled of mothballs and old paint. The room faced a brick wall, so close I could touch it if I opened the window. No sunlight ever reached that corner. I would wake each morning at 5:30, careful not to make noise as I dressed in the dark, then tiptoe downstairs to prepare breakfast for Rachel, her husband Derek, and their 2 children, Timmy and Sarah. The kitchen was my domain those early hours, the only time the house felt like it might belong to me too. I would slice fruit, brew coffee, scramble eggs, toast bread, set the table with care. Sometimes I'd pick wildflowers from the small backyard and arrange them in a vase as a centerpiece. By the time the family came down, everything was ready, warm, and inviting. But they rarely acknowledged the effort. Derek would grunt a greeting, already absorbed in his phone. Rachel would sigh about being late, grabbing food without looking at me. The children were sweet, especially Timmy, but they were hurried off to school before we could talk. I remember one particular morning in September, just a few months before everything fell apart. I had made blueberry pancakes from scratch, Rachel's favorite when she was a child. I remembered how she used to help me mix the batter, standing on a stool beside me, flour dusting her nose as she giggled. I thought maybe if I made them now, she'd remember those times, look at me with warmth instead of that distant tolerance that had become her default expression. When she came downstairs that morning, I watched her face hopefully as she saw the pancakes. There was a flicker of something, maybe recognition, maybe nostalgia. But then her phone buzzed, and whatever softness had appeared vanished. "I don't have time for a big breakfast, Mom," she said, grabbing a granola bar from the pantry. "I have an early meeting." She was out the door before I could respond, leaving the untouched pancakes cooling on the table. Derek came down next, saw the pancakes, and actually laughed. "Too many carbs for me," he said, patting his flat stomach. "Got to stay in shape." He poured himself a protein shake and followed Rachel out the door. Only Timmy, 8 years old and still innocent, ate the pancakes with enthusiasm, telling me they were the best he'd ever had. I held on to that small kindness like a lifeline. After they left, I would clean the entire house. 3 floors, 5 bathrooms, endless rooms filled with expensive furniture and designer touches. My knees ached as I scrubbed floors. My back protested as I hauled laundry up and down stairs. I dusted shelves lined with books no one read, straightened pillows on couches no one sat on, polished silverware that remained locked in cabinets. By noon, I was exhausted. But there was always more. Grocery shopping, errands, picking up dry cleaning, waiting for repair people, organizing closets. The house itself was beautiful. I couldn't deny that. Rachel and Derek had renovated it extensively, turning a modest brownstone into a showcase of modern luxury. Marble countertops in the kitchen, heated bathroom floors, a home theater in the basement, a landscaped garden that required weekly maintenance from professionals. Everything was perfect, pristine, magazine-worthy. And I was the invisible force that kept it that way. The unseen labor that maintained the illusion of effortless elegance. I remember the day they had a photographer come to shoot the house for a design magazine. Rachel was so excited, giving interviews about her aesthetic vision, her careful curation of every detail. The photographer took hundreds of photos, capturing the perfect angles of every room. But when the article was published 2 months later, there was no mention of me. Not the person who cleaned those gleaming floors, who dusted those artfully arranged bookshelves, who kept fresh flowers in every room. I was erased from the story of the house, as if the beauty maintained itself through magic rather than my daily toil. In the evenings, I cooked dinner. Elaborate meals, the kind I used to make when Rachel was little and would clap her hands in delight. Pot roast with roasted vegetables, lasagna layered with love, apple pie from scratch. But now the dinners were eaten in silence, or worse, with Rachel and Derek discussing their days as if I weren't there. They talked about their jobs, their investments in the stock market, their plans to buy a vacation home. Money flowed freely in their conversations, but never toward gratitude for my labor. I remember one dinner in particular in late August. I had made coq au vin, a French dish that took me hours to prepare properly. The chicken had to be braised just right, the sauce reduced to perfect consistency, the pearl onions caramelized with care. It was a dish Thomas, my late husband, had loved. He used to say I made it better than any restaurant in Chicago. As we ate, Derek mentioned casually that they were thinking of buying a condo in Miami as an investment property. The market there is hot right now, he said, swirling wine in his crystal glass. We could rent it out most of the year, use it ourselves during Chicago winters. How much are you looking at? I asked, trying to be part of the conversation. Derek glanced at Rachel before answering. Around $800,000, but with the rental income and appreciation, it should pay for itself in 5 years. $800,000? I thought. More than I had earned in my entire 40-year nursing career. And they were discussing it as casually as I might discuss buying groceries. Meanwhile, I was living in their back room, working unpaid labor, and they had never once offered me a salary or even regular allowance beyond occasionally covering my minimal personal expenses. I told myself I was contributing, that I was needed. But deep down, a voice whispered that I was being used. The voice grew louder when Rachel started asking for money. It began small, a few $100s here and there for unexpected expenses. But the requests grew. Thousands for renovations, tens of thousands for investments. She said it was temporary, that she'd pay me back with interest, that I was helping secure the family's future. I had savings, a modest sum accumulated over decades of careful living. My late husband Thomas had left me a small pension and a life insurance policy. I had worked as a nurse for 40 years, and though the pay was never extravagant, I had been prudent. I owned a small condo downtown, which I had rented out when I moved in with Rachel. That rental income, combined with my pension, meant I had financial security. Or so I thought. The requests for money became demands. Rachel would present me with investment opportunities, papers to sign, accounts to open. She spoke of stocks and bonds, of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, of wealth building and capital growth. She made it sound like I was participating in something exciting, something that would benefit us all. But I never saw returns. I never saw proof. Just more requests, more papers, more transfers from my accounts to hers. There was a pattern to it, I realize now. Rachel would choose her moments carefully. She'd wait until I was tired from a long day of housework, or distracted with the grandchildren, or feeling particularly grateful for some small kindness she'd shown me. Then she'd bring out the papers, speak quickly in financial jargon I didn't fully understand, and assure me it was all standard procedure. "This is how wealthy people manage their money, Mom," she'd say. "You have to trust me. I went to business school. I know what I'm doing." And I did trust her. She was my daughter. I had raised her, taught her values, believed I had instilled in her integrity and honesty. How could I imagine she was systematically stealing from me? The thought was too terrible to entertain, so I pushed it away and signed the papers she put in front of me. One afternoon in late October, I was cleaning Rachel's home office, a room I was usually forbidden to enter. But she had left for a business trip and asked me to water her plants. As I moved around the desk, I noticed a drawer slightly open. Inside were bank statements, investment portfolios, legal documents. Curiosity overcame caution, and I looked closer. What I found made my blood run cold. My daughter had been systematically draining my accounts for years. Transfers I had authorized, yes, but under false pretenses. Money I thought was going into joint investments had gone directly into her personal accounts. Funds I believed were in my name had been moved into assets I couldn't access. She had forged my signature on documents, created trusts that locked away my money, even sold my downtown condo without telling me, pocketing the entire proceeds. My hands shook as I pulled out document after document, bank statements showing my accounts being drained month after month, investment portfolios in Rachel's name funded entirely with my money, property deeds for real estate I'd never heard of, purchased with my savings, legal documents creating trusts and LLCs that locked my assets away from me while giving Rachel complete control. The sale of my condo was particularly devastating. That little downtown apartment had been my home for 20 years before Thomas died. It was where we'd lived our married life, where we'd brought Rachel home from the hospital, where we'd celebrated holidays and weathered storms. It held my memories, my history, my independence. Rachel had convinced me to rent it out when I moved in with her, saying the income would help me and the property would appreciate. She'd offered to manage the rental for me, handle the tenants and maintenance. I'd thought she was being helpful. But 6 months after I moved in with her, she'd sold it, forged my signature on the sales documents, hired lawyers who never contacted me, closed the deal, and deposited the $300,000 directly into her account. When I'd asked about the rental income a few weeks later, she'd told me the tenant was late on rent, that she'd handle it. I never asked again, trusting she was managing it properly. The numbers swam before my eyes. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. My entire life savings, gone. Transferred. Invested. Hidden. I saw statements showing her stock portfolio, flush with my money. Documents about Bitcoin wallets I had never heard of. Records of real estate purchases made in her name alone. My fortune, my security, my future, all diverted to build her wealth. There were spreadsheets, too, meticulous records Rachel had kept of every theft. She'd tracked it all, documented each transfer, noted which accounts she'd drained and which assets she'd acquired. It was organized, systematic, calculated. This wasn't impulsive or accidental. She had planned it, executed it over years with cold precision. I sat on the floor of that office, papers scattered around me, and wept. Not loud, wailing sobs, but silent tears that fell like rain. I felt hollowed out, betrayed at a level I hadn't known existed. This was my daughter, the child I had carried, nurtured, sacrificed everything for. And she had stolen from me with the cold calculation of a stranger. I don't know how long I sat there. The afternoon light shifted across the floor as hours passed. My legs cramped from sitting, but I couldn't move. I kept rereading the documents, hoping I was misunderstanding, that there was some explanation that would make this okay. But there wasn't. The evidence was clear, damning, irrefutable. Eventually, I heard the front door open. The children coming home from school, their voices bright and innocent. I quickly gathered the documents, returned them to the drawer, and stood on shaking legs. I splashed water on my face in the office bathroom, trying to erase the evidence of tears. Then I went downstairs to greet Timmy and Sarah as if my world hadn't just ended. When Rachel returned from her trip, I tried to confront her. I gathered the documents, laid them on the kitchen table, and asked her to explain. She looked at the papers, then at me, and her face hardened. "You're being dramatic," she said, her voice sharp as glass. "That money was always going to be mine eventually. I'm just managing it better than you ever could." I felt the words like a physical blow. "But it's my money," I whispered. "I earned it. I saved it." "And I'm making it grow," she shot back. "You should be thanking me. Do you have any idea how much wealth I've built? The stock market investments alone have tripled your original capital. The Bitcoin holdings are worth a fortune now. You'll benefit from all of this when the time comes." "When what time comes?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She didn't say it outright, but her silence was clear. When I died, she meant. When I was gone and she could claim everything without pretense or explanation. Until then, I was useful for housework and occasional babysitting, but my financial autonomy was already a ghost of the past. Her eyes were cold when she said it, devoid of the warmth I'd seen in them when she was young. I realized I was looking at a stranger wearing my daughter's face. When had this transformation happened? Or had she always been this way, and I'd simply refused to see it? "Rachel," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you sold my home, the condo where you grew up, where your father and I built our life. You forged my signature and sold it without even telling me." She shrugged, actually shrugged, as if this was a minor detail. "You weren't using it. The tenant was problematic. The market was good. It made financial sense. It wasn't yours to sell." "It's complicated, Mom. The legal structures I set up made it technically—" "Stop," I said, my voice rising. "Stop hiding behind legal technicalities. You stole from me, your own mother. Can you even hear yourself?" I tried to press the issue, but Derek intervened. He was a lawyer, smooth and confident, and he explained in condescending tones that everything Rachel had done was technically legal. "I had signed the documents," he said. "I had authorized the transfers. If I tried to challenge anything, I would lose in court and only embarrass myself. Besides," he added with a thin smile, "where would I go? I had no home anymore, no income beyond my pension, no support system. I needed them." Derek's voice had a lecturing quality, as if he were explaining basic concepts to a confused child. "Margaret, you have to understand how family trusts work. When you signed those documents Rachel prepared, you authorized her to make financial decisions on your behalf. Everything she's done has been within the scope of those authorizations. Any attorney will tell you the same thing." "But I didn't understand what I was signing," I protested. "She rushed me through it, used terms I didn't know." "Ignorance isn't a legal defense," Derek interrupted. "You're a competent adult. You signed contracts. Those contracts are binding. If you try to claim you didn't understand them, you're essentially arguing you're mentally incompetent. Is that really the road you want to go down? Because I promise you, that won't end well." The threat was clear. If I fought this, they would paint me as senile, incompetent, unable to manage my own affairs. They would use my age against me, make me look foolish or delusional. And Derek had the legal knowledge and connections to make that narrative stick. That night, I lay in my small back room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house. Rachel and Derek laughing in their bedroom. The children already asleep in rooms 4 times the size of mine. I thought about my life, the choices that had led me here. After Thomas died, I could have stayed in my condo, lived independently, enjoyed my retirement. But Rachel had convinced me to rent it out and move in with her family. "We need you, Mom," as she had said. The kids need their grandmother. We're family. Family. The word tasted bitter now. I thought of all the birthdays they had forgotten. My 65th passed without acknowledgement, though I had baked a cake for Sarah's 6th birthday just 2 weeks earlier, spending hours decorating it with fondant flowers. My 66th was marked by a text message from Rachel, sent at 11 at night. Happy birthday, sorry forgot earlier, crazy day. My 67th wasn't mentioned at all. Actually, that's not quite true. On my 67th birthday, I woke up hoping maybe this year would be different. I'd dropped hints the week before, mentioned casually that my birthday was coming up. That morning, I dressed carefully, put on a nice outfit, did my hair. I made breakfast as usual, but I added a special touch, making Belgian waffles with fresh strawberries, the kind of celebratory breakfast I used to make for Rachel on her birthdays. When she came downstairs, she looked at the waffles with irritation. Mom, I told you I'm doing low carb right now. Why would you make this? She grabbed a hard-boiled egg from the refrigerator and left. Derek didn't even come down, having already left for an early meeting. The children ate the waffles absently, absorbed in their iPads, and then I drove them to school as usual. The whole day passed. Afternoon turned to evening. I cooked dinner, we ate, I cleaned up. At 9 o'clock, as I was getting ready for bed, I realized no one had remembered. No one had said a word. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed in that dark back room and cried as quietly as I could, not wanting anyone to hear. I thought of the illnesses they had ignored. The time I had the flu and stayed in my room for a week, feverish and weak, and no one checked on me. I survived on crackers and water, too ill to cook, too proud to ask for help. When I finally emerged, pale and shaky, Rachel glanced at me and said, "Oh, you look tired. Maybe you should rest more." That week of illness was one of the worst of my life. The fever had spiked so high I'd hallucinated, seeing Thomas at the foot of my bed, reaching for me. I'd been so weak I couldn't walk to the bathroom without holding onto the walls. At one point, I'd seriously worried I might die in that room and no one would notice for days. But I couldn't call out for help. Pride, shame, fear of being a burden. All of it kept me silent. When I'd finally recovered enough to emerge, the house was a mess. Dishes piled in the sink, laundry overflowing, the children in mismatched clothes because no one had done their washing. Rachel had looked at me with what I can only describe as relief tinged with resentment, as if I'd been deliberately shirking my duties by being ill. Within an hour of being out of bed, I was back to work, cleaning up a week's worth of neglect despite still being weak and dizzy. I thought of the holidays where I cooked for 20 people, extended family and friends, spending days preparing traditional dishes, setting a beautiful table, creating warmth and joy. But I ate alone in the kitchen, cleaning as others celebrated in the dining room. I thought of the times I babysat, sometimes for days while Rachel and Derek traveled for work or pleasure, and returned to no thank you, just a list of criticisms about how I had managed things wrong. I thought of my friends, the ones I had drifted away from because Rachel always needed something. Coffee dates canceled because Rachel needed me to wait for a furniture delivery. Book club abandoned because Rachel needed me to drive the kids to activities. Volunteer work at the hospital, something I had loved, given up because Rachel said I was too busy with family obligations. My friend Patricia had been particularly persistent, calling me regularly even when I kept canceling plans. "Margaret, I miss you," she'd say. "When can we get together? Just you and me, like old times?" "Soon," I'd always promise. "Things are just really busy right now with the family." After about the 10th cancellation, Patricia had asked me gently, "Are you okay? Really okay? You sound different." I'd wanted to tell her everything, to admit how trapped I felt, how invisible I'd become. But Rachel had been in the next room, and I couldn't risk her overhearing. "I'm fine," I'd said, "just adjusting to living with family again. It's an adjustment." "Well, I'm here if you need me," Patricia had said, always. I'd held on to that promise like a secret treasure, not knowing then how desperately I would need it. I had become invisible, I realized. A ghost in my own life, serving others while disappearing myself. And now I understood it had all been calculated. Rachel had isolated me, made me dependent, then exploited that dependency to take everything I had worked for. The next morning, I made a decision. I would endure until I could plan my escape. I would be quiet, compliant, invisible as always, but I would be watching, learning, preparing. I began to gather documents secretly, making copies when Rachel was out. I started researching my legal rights, using the public library computers so there would be no digital trail. I reached out quietly to my old friend Patricia, a former nursing colleague, and told her a carefully edited version of my situation. Patricia was horrified. "Margaret, you have to get out of there," she said over coffee at a diner far from my neighborhood. "This is financial abuse. This is exploitation." "I know," I said, stirring my coffee, watching the cream swirl. "But I need to be smart about it. I need proof. I need a plan. I need somewhere to go." Patricia squeezed my hand. "You can stay with me as long as you need. My spare room is yours." I felt tears prick my eyes. Kindness, genuine and freely given, felt foreign after so long. "Thank you," I whispered. But even as I planned, doubt crept in. What if I was wrong? What if Rachel really did intend to share the wealth she had built with my money? What if I was being ungrateful, selfish, difficult as she sometimes implied? What if leaving meant losing my grandchildren forever, never seeing Timmy's gap-toothed smile or Sarah's proud displays of her schoolwork? I found myself standing in front of the mirror in my small bathroom, studying my reflection. I looked old, I realized. Not just aged, but worn down. My shoulders stooped, my face lined with more than years. I looked defeated. When had that happened? I used to stand tall, proud of my work as a nurse, confident in my worth. Now I looked like a woman who had forgotten she mattered. I pulled out a box from under my bed, filled with old photographs. Pictures of Rachel as a baby, chubby and smiling. Rachel as a child, holding my hand at the zoo. Rachel as a teenager, rolling her eyes at my advice but still hugging me goodnight. Rachel as a young woman, beautiful in her wedding dress, whispering, "I love you, Mom," as I fixed her veil. Where had that girl gone? When had she become this cold, calculating stranger? Or had I simply refused to see who she really was, blinded by maternal love and hope? I put the photos away, tucking the box back under the bed. Memories, I labeled it in my mind. Just memories now, not a blueprint for the future. The breaking point came in November, just before Thanksgiving. Rachel informed me, not asked but told me, that I would not be joining the family for Thanksgiving dinner. They were hosting Derek's family this year, she explained, and the house would be too crowded. I should stay in my room and keep quiet. She would bring me a plate later. I stood in the kitchen, absorbing this information, feeling my heart crack. Thanksgiving had always been my holiday. I had hosted it for 30 years, cooking for days, creating feasts that brought everyone together. And now I was being exiled to my room like an embarrassing relative to be hidden away. "I see," I said quietly. "Don't make a big deal of it, Mom," Rachel said, not looking at me as she scrolled through her phone. "It's just one dinner." But it wasn't just one dinner. It was a symbol of everything I had lost, everything I had become in this house. Not family, but staff. Not loved, but tolerated. Not valued, but used. That night, I made my decision. I would leave. I contacted Patricia and told her I was ready. I started packing. Slowly and secretly, a few items at a time so no one would notice. I gathered my important documents, the copies I had made of the financial records, my passport, my birth certificate. I withdrew what little money I still had access to from my pension account, storing the cash in an envelope hidden in my pillowcase. On Thanksgiving morning, while Rachel was busy preparing for her in-laws, I packed my final items. One suitcase, that was all I took. Clothes, toiletries, a few precious photographs, my mother's jewelry that I had somehow managed to keep hidden. I left behind furniture Rachel had called mine but that I knew she would claim. I left behind books, knickknacks, a lifetime of accumulated possessions. None of it mattered anymore. I waited until the house was full of Derek's family, noise and laughter filling rooms I had cleaned just hours before. I waited until Rachel was occupied, playing the perfect hostess, showing off her beautiful home, her successful life, her stock portfolio and investments she discussed so casually over wine. I waited until no one was watching the back door, and then I walked out. Down the hallway, through the kitchen, out the back door, down the alley. My suitcase bumped against my leg as I walked, each step taking me further from my prison. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I took the bus to Patricia's apartment in Wicker Park, a modest 2-bedroom in an older building. She met me at the door, took my suitcase, and wrapped me in a hug. "You're safe now," she said, and I believed her. That night, sleeping in Patricia's spare room, I slept deeply for the first time in years. No anxiety about tomorrow's tasks, no dread of requests I couldn't refuse, no fear of saying the wrong thing and facing silent punishment. Just sleep, deep and dreamless and healing. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the window. Patricia's apartment faced east, and the morning light was golden and warm. I lay in bed, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeams, and felt something unfamiliar stir in my chest. Hope, maybe, or possibility. Patricia made coffee, and we sat at her small kitchen table, discussing next steps. First, I needed legal advice. Patricia had a friend who was a lawyer, someone who specialized in elder abuse and financial exploitation. She called her, explained the situation, and got me an appointment for Monday. Second, I needed to access my pension and any other funds Rachel hadn't managed to steal. Patricia helped me call the pension office and put a freeze on my account, preventing any unauthorized access. We called the bank where I had my original savings account, the one from before I moved in with Rachel. It still existed, though nearly empty, and I changed all the passwords and security questions. Third, I needed to decide what to do about Rachel. Did I want to pursue legal action? Did I want to confront her? Did I want to cut ties completely or try to salvage some relationship? I didn't have answers yet. The betrayal was too fresh, the wound too deep. But I knew I had time now to figure it out. For the first time in years, I was in control of my own decisions. Rachel called that evening. I saw her name on my phone, and my first instinct was to answer, to explain, to apologize for leaving. But Patricia gently took the phone from my hand. "You don't owe her anything right now," she said. "Take time. Breathe. Decide what you want to say when you're ready." The phone rang 5 more times that night. Then Derek called. Then texts started coming. "Where are you? Are you okay? We need to talk. You're being ridiculous. Come home. Home. As if that house had ever been home. As if I had ever been anything more than unpaid labor and a source of funds." I didn't respond. I turned off my phone and slept again, deep and undisturbed. The weekend passed in a blur of quiet normalcy. Patricia and I cooked simple meals together. We watched old movies. We talked about everything and nothing, the way old friends do. She told me about her life, her grown children who visited regularly and actually seemed to enjoy her company. She showed me pictures of grandchildren who called her weekly, sent her cards, remembered her birthday. I realized I had been living in a distorted reality for so long that I had forgotten what normal family relationships looked like. I had accepted cruelty as love, exploitation as need, abuse as obligation. On Monday, I met with Patricia's lawyer friend, a sharp woman named Jennifer who specialized in elder law. I brought all my documentation, the copied bank statements and investment records and forged signatures. Jennifer reviewed everything with a practiced eye, her expression growing darker as she read. "This is extensive financial exploitation," she said finally. "Your daughter has systematically stolen from you, and the amount involved is significant. We're talking about potential criminal charges, not just civil recovery." My stomach churned. Criminal charges meant police, courts, publicity. It meant formally accusing my daughter of crimes. It meant burning every bridge, destroying any possibility of reconciliation. "What are my options?" I asked. Jennifer laid them out clearly. I could pursue criminal charges, which might result in Rachel facing prosecution and potentially jail time. I could file a civil lawsuit to recover my assets, which would be lengthy and expensive, but might succeed in getting my money back. I could report her to financial regulators if she had used her position or professional credentials to facilitate the theft. Or I could do nothing, walk away, and try to rebuild my life with what little I had left. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "That depends on what you want," Jennifer said. "Do you want justice, revenge, your money back, peace, closure?" I thought about it. What did I want? A week ago, I would have said I wanted my daughter back, the little girl who loved me, the relationship I thought we had. But that had been an illusion, I understood now. That daughter had never really existed. Or if she had, she was long gone. "I want my life back," I said finally. "I want control over my own finances, my own future. I want to be able to live independently without fear. Whether that includes recovering money or just preventing further theft, I don't know yet." Jennifer nodded. "Then let's start with protection. We'll freeze all your accounts, put alerts on your credit, secure your assets. We'll send a cease and desist letter to your daughter, making clear that any further unauthorized access to your funds will result in criminal prosecution. Then we'll evaluate what recovery might be possible and whether it's worth pursuing." It felt good to have a plan, to have someone on my side who understood the law and could fight for me. We spent the rest of the appointment going through documents, signing authorizations, building a strategy. Jennifer was meticulous in her approach. She explained each document before I signed it, made sure I understood every step we were taking, treated me with respect and dignity that had been absent from my life for so long. She asked questions about my relationship with Rachel, trying to understand the psychological dynamics of the exploitation. "This is a common pattern," she explained. "Adult children who isolate their elderly parents, create dependency, then exploit that vulnerability for financial gain. It's more widespread than people realize, and it's devastating because it destroys trust at the most fundamental level." "Do people recover from this?" I asked. "Financially? Emotionally?" "Some do," Jennifer said. "It depends on many factors. How much was taken, whether we can recover it, what support systems you have. But I'll tell you this, Margaret. The fact that you recognized what was happening, gathered evidence, and left takes tremendous courage. Many victims never make it that far. They die in those situations, never having reclaimed their autonomy." Her words hit me hard. I could have been one of those statistics. If I hadn't found those documents, if doubt hadn't overcome my trust, I might have spent the rest of my days in that back room, serving the family that was slowly consuming everything I had. When I left Jennifer's office, I felt different. Stronger, maybe. Or just less helpless. I was taking action, reclaiming agency over my life. It felt terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. That evening, Rachel showed up at Patricia's apartment. I don't know how she found me, but she was there, pounding on the door, demanding to see me. Patricia answered, blocking the doorway with her small frame and surprising fierceness. "Margaret doesn't want to see you right now," Patricia said firmly. "She's my mother," Rachel shouted. "You can't keep her from me." "She's an adult who can make her own choices," Patricia shot back. "And right now, she chooses not to see you. Respect that, or I'll call the police." I listened from the bedroom, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to run out, to fix this, to smooth things over as I always had. But a stronger part, the part that was slowly waking up after years of dormancy, told me to stay put, to let Patricia handle it, to prioritize my own well-being over Rachel's demands for the first time in recent memory. Eventually, Rachel left, but her parting words, shouted through the door, were chilling. "You'll regret this, Mom. You're making a huge mistake. You'll end up alone with nothing, and don't come crawling back to me." I sat on Patricia's couch, shaking. Not from fear, but from the realization of how deeply Rachel's sense of entitlement ran. She genuinely believed she had a right to my money, my labor, my presence. She couldn't conceive of a world where I might have my own needs, my own rights, my own boundaries. The next day, Jennifer's cease and desist letter was delivered. I wasn't there to see Rachel's reaction, but Derek called, his lawyer voice in full force, threatening countersuits and accusations of elder manipulation by Patricia. Jennifer handled him coolly, pointing out that their case was non-existent while ours was documented with evidence. The calls and texts continued for days. Rachel alternated between rage and emotional manipulation. One message would accuse me of abandoning my grandchildren. The next would promise to make things right if I just came back. Then threats of cutting me off completely, as if I hadn't already been cut off. Then tearful voicemails about how much she loved me and needed me. I didn't respond to any of it. Jennifer advised complete silence until we had secured my assets and determined our next legal steps. It was hard, fighting every instinct I had to engage, to explain, to fix. But each day of silence got easier. Within 2 weeks, we had locked down my accounts and put fraud alerts everywhere. We discovered that Rachel had indeed gained access to my pension, setting up automatic transfers to her accounts. Jennifer got those stopped and reversed. We found that my old condo had been sold, but the money had gone into an account Rachel controlled. Jennifer filed paperwork to freeze that account and begin recovery proceedings. The total amount Rachel had taken was staggering. Over $300,000, accumulated over 5 years of careful theft and manipulation. Some of it had been invested legitimately, and those investments had indeed grown. The stock portfolio she had built with my money was now worth nearly $500,000. The Bitcoin she had bought had appreciated even more dramatically. On paper, my original savings had multiplied significantly, but none of it was accessible to me. It was all in Rachel's name, in trusts and accounts I had been tricked into signing over. Recovering it would require proving fraud and financial exploitation, a lengthy legal battle with no guaranteed outcome. Jennifer was blunt about the challenges. Even with clear evidence of forgery and manipulation, courts are often reluctant to intervene in family financial arrangements. She'll claim you were a willing participant, that you understood what you were signing. She'll say you're experiencing cognitive decline and are being manipulated now by Patricia and me. It's going to be ugly. I thought about that. Did I want to spend the next year or more in court, reliving betrayal, fighting my own daughter in public? Did I want to drain what little resources I had left on legal fees, with no guarantee of success? Or did I want to walk away, cut my losses, and rebuild with what I had? It wasn't an easy choice. The nurse in me, who had spent 40 years fighting for patients' rights and dignity, wanted justice. But the tired, wounded woman I had become wanted peace more than vindication. I decided to split the difference. We would pursue civil recovery through negotiation first, threatening full litigation if Rachel didn't cooperate. We would give her a chance to return at least some of the assets voluntarily, avoiding public scandal and criminal charges. If she refused, then we would escalate. Jennifer drafted a formal demand letter, laying out exactly what Rachel had taken, how she had taken it, and what we expected in return. We asked for the return of 2/3 of the assets, allowing Rachel to keep 1/3 as compensation for her investment management, despite the fact that she had no legal right to any of it. We gave her 30 days to respond. The response came in 15 days through Derek's law firm. It was predictably hostile, denying all wrongdoing, claiming everything was legitimate and authorized, threatening defamation suits if we persisted. But buried in the legal bluster was a hint of nervousness. They knew their position was weak. They knew that if this went to trial, their reputations would be destroyed even if they won. Jennifer saw the opening. She drafted a counter-response, escalating our demands and attaching copies of forged signatures, unauthorized transfers, and email evidence of Rachel's deliberate deception. She set a new deadline: 14 days to begin good faith negotiations, or we would file criminal complaints and civil suits simultaneously. This time, the response came in 10 days. Derek's firm requested a mediation session to explore possible resolution of this unfortunate family misunderstanding. We agreed. The mediation was scheduled for early January in a neutral office downtown. I prepared myself emotionally, knowing I would have to face Rachel directly for the first time since I left. The day of mediation, I dressed carefully in my best outfit, a navy suit I had bought for Rachel's wedding 10 years ago. I wanted to look strong, competent, not like a confused elderly woman who could be dismissed or intimidated. Patricia came with me for moral support, sitting in the waiting room while I went in with Jennifer. Rachel and Derek were already there with their lawyers, two sharp young men in expensive suits. Rachel looked thinner than I remembered, her face tight with stress. When our eyes met, I saw a flash of something, guilt, maybe, or fear, quickly hidden behind a mask of cold indifference. The mediator, a patient woman named Dr. Stevens, explained the process and ground rules. This was voluntary, confidential, and non-binding unless we reached an agreement we all chose to formalize. The goal was to find a mutually acceptable resolution without litigation. For the next 4 hours, we negotiated. Rachel's lawyers started with the position that she owed me nothing, that every transaction had been legitimate. Jennifer systematically destroyed that argument with documentation. Forged signatures were presented, confirmed by handwriting experts we had hired. Emails were read aloud where Rachel discussed hiding assets from me. Bank employees were quoted describing how Rachel had pressured them to process transactions without my knowledge. One email in particular was devastating. Jennifer read it aloud. "Mom is completely trusting. She signs whatever I put in front of her. As long as I use enough financial jargon and act like I'm doing her a favor, she doesn't question anything. It's almost too easy." Rachel had sent that email to Derek 18 months earlier, discussing how to gain access to another of my accounts. Hearing those words, spoken in my daughter's voice through Jennifer's reading, broke something in me. The hope I'd been unconsciously holding on to, the hope that this had all been a misunderstanding, finally died. Slowly, reluctantly, Rachel's position shifted. Perhaps some mistakes had been made. Perhaps some paperwork had been improperly handled. Perhaps a partial return of funds might be appropriate to maintain family harmony. We broke for lunch. In a private room, Jennifer told me, "We're close. They're scared. We can probably get 75% back if you're willing to sign a confidentiality agreement and release of all claims." 75%. It was more than I had hoped for, but less than I deserved. But it would mean security, independence, freedom. It would mean ending this nightmare and moving forward. "What about the relationship?" I asked. "What about Timmy and Sarah?" Jennifer's expression softened. "That's not something mediation can fix, Margaret. That's between you and Rachel, if there's anything left to salvage." When we reconvened, I made a decision. I looked directly at Rachel and spoke, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. "I'll accept the return of 75% of the assets in exchange for releasing legal claims. But I want something else, too. I want to see my grandchildren. Not supervised, not controlled, just regular grandmother visits. If you agree to that, genuinely agree, we can end this now." Rachel's face was unreadable. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then quietly, she spoke. "I never meant to hurt you, Mom. I thought I was helping, managing things better than you could. I thought you'd be proud of how much the investments had grown." It wasn't an apology, not really. It was justification dressed up as explanation. But it was also the closest thing to acknowledgement I was likely to get. "Did you think I'd be proud that you forged my signature?" I asked. "That you sold my home without telling me? That you hid money I had earned through 40 years of work?" Rachel flinched. "I made mistakes. I got caught up in the opportunities, the potential. But it was always with the intention of securing our family's future, including yours. By leaving me with nothing in my name, by making me completely dependent on you, that was securing my future?" Silence filled the room. Even the lawyers seemed uncomfortable. Finally, Derek spoke. "We're prepared to offer an 80% return of assets, immediate and unrestricted access to the grandchildren, and a formal apology letter, in exchange for complete release of claims and a mutual confidentiality agreement." I looked at Jennifer. She nodded slightly. It was a good offer, better than we might get in court after years of litigation. 85%, I said. "And the apology needs to acknowledge specifically what was done wrong, not just vague expressions of regret." More discussion, more negotiation. In the end, we settled on 82%, a detailed written apology that Rachel would sign, and a visitation agreement for the grandchildren that was surprisingly generous, probably because Derek wanted this over with. When the papers were signed, I felt numb. Not triumphant, not relieved, just empty. I had won, in a sense. I would get most of my money back. I would see my grandchildren. But I had lost my daughter. Or rather, I had finally admitted to myself that the daughter I thought I had never really existed. As we prepared to leave, Rachel stopped me in the hallway outside the mediation room. Her lawyers had gone ahead, and we were alone for the first time since Thanksgiving. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking, "I really am sorry. I know you don't believe me, but I am." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the little girl I had raised, but I also saw the woman she had become, capable of betrayal and manipulation. Both were real. Both were my daughter. "I believe you're sorry it turned out this way," I said carefully. "I believe you wish things were different, but I don't believe you're sorry for what you did, only for getting caught." Her face crumpled. "That's not fair." "Fair?" The word almost made me laugh, but not with humor. "You want to talk about fair, after everything?" "I gave you a home," she said, defensive now. "I let you live with us, be part of our family. You gave me a back room and endless chores and stole my savings," I replied, my voice rising despite my intention to stay calm. "You isolated me from my friends, monopolized my time, and made me feel like I owed you for the privilege of being used." "I never thought of it that way," she whispered. "I know," I said, and I meant it. "That's the problem. You never thought about what it was like for me. You only thought about what you wanted, what you needed, what made your life easier." We stood there in the hallway, years of unspoken pain finally voiced. I waited for her to argue, to defend herself, but she just stood there, tears running down her face, looking lost. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to hug her, to make it better as I had done countless times throughout her life. But I didn't. I couldn't. She was an adult, responsible for her own choices and their consequences. "I hope you figure things out, Rachel," I said finally. "I hope you learn to value people for more than what they can give you. I hope you teach Timmy and Sarah different values than the ones you've shown me." Then I walked away, down the hall to where Patricia and Jennifer were waiting. I didn't look back. The money transfer took 3 weeks to complete. When it finally hit my account, I sat at Patricia's kitchen table and stared at the bank statement. $847,000. My original savings plus appreciation from the investments Rachel had made, minus her 23% in legal fees. It was more money than I had ever had at once in my life. It was security, freedom, possibility. But it felt like blood money, compensation for betrayal. I couldn't quite be happy about it. Jennifer had advised me to invest it conservatively, suggested financial advisors who specialized in retirement planning. But I wasn't ready to think about that yet. I just wanted it to be safe. Mine, untouchable by anyone else. In February, I had my first visit with Timmy and Sarah. We met at a children's museum, neutral territory where Rachel wouldn't hover. The kids were shy at first, uncertain after months apart. But children are resilient, and soon Timmy was pulling me from exhibit to exhibit, chattering about dinosaurs and space, while Sarah showed me her latest drawings. We had lunch in the museum cafe, and I listened to their stories about school and friends and their new puppy. They didn't mention the conflict between their mother and me, and I didn't bring it up. This time was about us, about rebuilding our own relationship separate from the adult drama. When I dropped them back at Rachel's house, I didn't go in. Rachel opened the door, took the children, and closed it again without a word. That was fine. I had my grandchildren back, and that was enough. Through the winter and into spring, I slowly rebuilt my life. I moved out of Patricia's apartment and into a small rental house in Evanston, a charming neighborhood north of Chicago. It had 2 bedrooms, a tiny garden, and a view of the lake from the upstairs window. It felt like mine in a way no space had felt in years. The house became my sanctuary. I furnished it slowly, carefully, choosing pieces that I liked rather than what someone else expected. I painted the walls in warm colors, hung artwork that made me smile, filled bookshelves with novels I'd been wanting to read. I planted flowers in the garden, vegetables in raised beds, herbs in pots by the kitchen window. Every morning I woke in my own bedroom, in my own bed, with sunlight streaming through curtains I had chosen. I made coffee in my own kitchen, sat at my own table, planned my own day. The simple autonomy of it still felt miraculous months later. I reconnected with old friends from my nursing days. We started a monthly dinner group, taking turns hosting or trying new restaurants. I was shocked by how much I had missed having peers, people my own age with similar experiences, who valued my opinions and wanted my company. I joined a book club at the local library. I started volunteering at a free clinic, using my nursing skills to help people who couldn't afford regular medical care. I took a watercolor painting class at the community center, discovering a talent I never knew I had. The watercolor class became particularly meaningful. The instructor, a retired art teacher named Mrs. Chen, encouraged experimentation and self-expression. I painted landscapes at first, safe subjects that reminded me of happier times. But gradually, I found myself painting more abstract pieces, swirls of color that expressed emotions I hadn't known how to voice. Dark blues and grays for the years of feeling trapped. Bright yellows and oranges for the freedom I was discovering. Mrs. Chen displayed one of my paintings in the community center gallery, and when I saw it hanging there with my name beneath it, I cried. Not from sadness, but from the profound experience of being seen, acknowledged, valued for something I created. The volunteer work at the free clinic reconnected me with my nursing identity. I had been a good nurse, compassionate and skilled, and I had missed that version of myself. The clinic served uninsured immigrants, homeless individuals, and working poor who fell through the cracks of the healthcare system. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I would assess patients, dress wounds, check blood pressures, offer comfort and advice. The head physician, Dr. Martinez, often remarked on my gentle bedside manner and depth of experience. "You're a natural healer," he told me once. I had forgotten that about myself. One patient in particular touched my heart. Her name was Maria, a 60-year-old woman from Guatemala who cleaned office buildings at night. She came to the clinic with diabetes she'd been ignoring because she couldn't afford treatment. Over months of visits, I taught her how to manage her condition, helped her apply for medication assistance programs, and connected her with resources. When her blood sugar levels finally stabilized, she hugged me with tears streaming down her face. "You saved my life," she said. I thought about how good it felt to help someone who genuinely appreciated it, who didn't take my care for granted or exploit my willingness to serve. The book club opened yet another door. The members were mostly women in their 50s and 60s, all avid readers with strong opinions and generous spirits. We read everything from literary fiction to memoirs to mysteries. But more than the books, I valued the conversations. These women spoke their minds, disagreed respectfully, supported each other through life's challenges. When I finally shared a carefully edited version of my story with the group, they rallied around me with understanding and validation. Several had their own stories of family betrayal or difficult adult children. I wasn't alone in my experience, and knowing that helped heal something deep inside me. Through these activities, through building a life of my own choosing, I began to understand something crucial. For years, I had defined myself through my relationship with Rachel. I was her mother first, everything else second. My identity had become enmeshed with hers, my worth measured by her approval or disapproval. But now I was discovering that I was Margaret, a whole person with interests and talents and friendships that had nothing to do with being anyone's mother. I could be loving and generous without being used. I could care for others without losing myself. Slowly, I began to recognize myself again. The confident, competent woman I had been before I lost myself in service to my daughter's needs. I stood taller, smiled more, felt purposeful. In May, something unexpected happened. I received a letter from my bank, asking me to come in for a meeting about my account. Concerned there was a problem, I made an appointment immediately. The banker who met with me was Robert Chen, a man about my age with kind eyes and a warm smile. I had seen him when setting up my account, but we hadn't really talked. Now he invited me into his office and closed the door. "Ms. Williams," he said, "I wanted to speak with you personally about some irregularities I noticed in your account history." My heart sank. Had Rachel found a way to access my money again? "What kind of irregularities?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Not current ones," he assured me quickly. "Historical ones, from several years ago. I was reviewing account notes and saw a pattern that concerned me. Large transfers out of your accounts, often to the same recipient, with notes indicating they were for investments you were making jointly. But the investments never showed up in any linked accounts." I exhaled. "I know. That's been resolved legally. My daughter was managing those transfers and it didn't work out as planned. But we've settled it." Robert nodded slowly. "I see. The reason I wanted to talk to you is that I noticed this pattern years ago, when it was first happening. And I did nothing. I convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere in family financial arrangements. But I've regretted that decision ever since." I was surprised by his candor. "Why tell me this now?" "Because I want you to know that you have an advocate here. Someone watching your accounts, making sure nothing unusual happens again. And because I wanted to apologize. I could have said something, maybe prevented some of what happened, and I didn't." His words touched something in me. Here was a virtual stranger who felt guilty about not protecting me, while my own daughter had felt entitled to exploit me. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." We talked for a while longer. Robert shared that he had experience with financial elder abuse in his own family, an uncle who had been scammed by a caregiver. He had helped expose the situation, but felt guilty he hadn't noticed sooner. It drove him to be more vigilant with his clients now, even when it meant awkward conversations. "You know," he said as our meeting was ending, "you have substantial assets now. Have you thought about what you want to do with them? Not just investing for safety, but investing for meaning? For legacy?" I admitted I hadn't thought much beyond keeping the money safe. "May I suggest something?" he asked. Take some time to think about what matters to you. What causes, what values, what vision for the future. Then we can look at ways to use your resources to support those things, whether through philanthropy or community investment, or family trusts that protect future generations from the kind of exploitation you experienced. It was a different way of thinking about money, not just as security, but as a tool for creating positive change. I promised to consider it. That conversation stuck with me. What did matter to me? What kind of legacy did I want to leave? Not just money for Rachel and the grandchildren, though I still wanted to provide for them, but something more meaningful, more purposeful. I thought about my years as a nurse, the patients I had helped, especially those who couldn't afford proper care. I thought about the free clinic where I now volunteered, always struggling for funding and supplies. I thought about elderly people like me who might face exploitation and have no resources to fight back. An idea began to form. What if I used part of my settlement to create something lasting? A fund or foundation to help other seniors facing financial abuse, or a program to provide free legal services to elderly victims of exploitation. I made another appointment with Robert, this time bringing ideas instead of just questions. He listened, asked thoughtful questions, and then connected me with a specialist in charitable giving. Together, we developed a plan. I would set aside a significant portion of my assets, about $200,000, to create a foundation focused on elder financial abuse prevention and legal assistance. The foundation would provide free legal help to seniors trying to recover stolen assets, education programs on recognizing and preventing exploitation, and advocacy for stronger legal protections. The rest of my money would be invested conservatively for my own security and future needs, with a trust established to eventually benefit my grandchildren in a way that Rachel couldn't access or control. It took months to set everything up properly, working with lawyers and accountants and nonprofit specialists. But by autumn, the Margaret Williams Foundation for Elder Financial Protection was officially established. I was listed as founder and board chair, a role I took seriously. We started small, helping 3 clients in our first year, but each case mattered. Each elderly person we helped recover stolen assets or protected from ongoing abuse felt like a vindication of my own struggle. I was turning my pain into purpose. Our first client was a man named James, 73, whose son had drained his retirement accounts through a series of fake investment schemes. We helped him recover nearly $60,000 and file criminal charges. The second was a woman named Eleanor, whose daughter-in-law had forged documents to gain power of attorney and sell her house. We helped her void the sale and regain control of her assets. The third was a widower named Frank, whose caregiver had been systematically stealing from him for years. Each case had its own heartbreak, its own story of trust betrayed and family bonds broken. But each also had moments of triumph, of justice served, of dignity restored. I found myself completely absorbed in the work, attending meetings, reviewing cases, fundraising, building partnerships with other organizations. The foundation gave me something I'd lost during my years with Rachel, a sense of purpose that was truly my own, work that mattered, impact I could see and measure. It wasn't about serving someone else's agenda or making someone else's life easier at the expense of my own. It was about using my experience, my resources, my voice to help others. Rachel found out about the foundation through a mutual acquaintance. She called me, her voice tight with emotion. "I saw what you did," she said. "The foundation." I waited, unsure where this was going. "Is that what you think of me?" she asked. "A thief? An abuser? You're publicly declaring that's what I am." "The foundation is not about you," I said firmly. "It's about helping people who have no other options. It's about taking what I learned and using it for good." "But everyone will know," she said. "Everyone will figure out why you started it. You're humiliating me." I felt a flash of anger. Even now, she could only think about how things affected her. "Rachel, you humiliated yourself with your choices. I'm simply choosing to help others avoid what I went through. If that embarrasses you, maybe that tells you something about your own actions." She hung up on me. We didn't speak for weeks after that. But I continued my work, and slowly, the foundation grew. We helped more clients, expanded our programs, partnered with other organizations working on elder rights issues. Through it all, I continued seeing Timmy and Sarah regularly. They were growing so fast, becoming their own people. Timmy wanted to be a scientist, spending hours telling me about experiments he was trying. Sarah was artistic, always drawing or painting, and I encouraged her talent, buying her supplies and taking her to galleries. They never asked directly about the conflict between their mother and me, but I could tell they sensed it. One day, Sarah, now 11, asked me quietly, "Grandma, why don't you come to our house anymore?" I thought carefully about how to answer. "Your mom and I had some disagreements about grown-up things," I said. "We're working through them, but in the meantime, I prefer to see you in other places where we can just focus on having fun together." "Did she do something bad?" Sarah asked, her young face serious. "She made choices I disagreed with," I said carefully. "But that's between us. It doesn't change how much I love you and your brother, or how proud I am of you both." Sarah nodded, satisfied with that answer. But I wondered what Rachel told them, what narrative she had created to explain my absence from their daily lives. In December, almost exactly a year after I had left Rachel's house, I received an unexpected text from her. "Can we talk? Really talk? Just the two of us?" I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to maintain the safe distance I had built. But another part, the mother part that never quite goes away, was curious. What did she want to say? I agreed to meet at a coffee shop, neutral and public. When I arrived, Rachel was already there, looking nervous. She had a folder in front of her, but didn't touch it as I sat down. "Thank you for coming," she said. I nodded, waiting. "I've been in therapy," she said. "Since the mediation. Derek insisted, said I needed to process things. I didn't want to go at first, but now, I'm glad I did." "What did you learn?" I asked, genuinely curious. "That I have control issues," she said with a wry smile. "That I grew up feeling like I had to manage everything perfectly to be worthy of love. That I conflated taking care of people with controlling their resources. That I justified taking your money because I convinced myself I was protecting you from making bad decisions." It was the most self-aware thing I had ever heard her say. "I still don't think I meant to hurt you," she continued, "but I understand now that impact matters more than intent. I hurt you terribly, regardless of what I told myself I was doing." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Yes," I said, "you did." "The foundation," she said. "At first I was angry about it, but now I think I understand. You needed to take your pain and make something good from it, and you're helping people. That's very you, very much the nurse and caretaker I remember." "I'm still a caretaker," I said. "Just not yours anymore. You're an adult, Rachel. You don't need me to take care of you. You never really did. You just wanted control." She flinched but nodded. "You're right, and I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not just for getting caught, like you said, but for what I did. For using you. For taking advantage of your love. For being so focused on building wealth that I forgot about building relationships." I wanted to believe her. But trust, once broken so completely, isn't easily repaired. "What do you want from this conversation?" I asked. She opened the folder. Inside were documents, and as she spread them out, I realized what they were. "The other 18%? She said. "The money you agreed I could keep in the settlement. I want to give it back." I stared at the paperwork. It represented about $160,000. "I don't understand," I said. "You were right when you said it felt like blood money," she said. "I've been investing it, trying to grow it more. telling myself I earned it through my management. But it's yours. All of it. I want to give it back. No strings, no conditions, just because it's the right thing to do. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She seemed different somehow, more grounded, less frantic. There was a sadness in her eyes, but also something like peace. Therapy is expensive, I said quietly. If you're trying to change, you'll need resources. I have my own money now, she said. Derek and I are both doing well in our careers. I don't need yours. I never really did. I just wanted it because I thought more was always better. But I've learned that some things cost more than money. We sat in silence for a moment. I don't know if we can fix this, I said. I don't know if I can trust you again. I know, she said, and I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you to accept this as a first step toward me being the daughter you deserved all along. Whether that eventually leads to reconciliation or not, I want to do this. I accepted the documents. We arranged for the transfer, and true to her word, Rachel initiated the return of the funds with no complications or strings attached. Over the following months, we began to slowly rebuild something. Not the old relationship, that was gone forever. But something new, more honest, more bounded. We had monthly lunches, just the two of us, where we talked carefully about safe topics and occasionally touched on harder ones. Rachel shared what she was learning in therapy. I shared about the foundation's work. We talked about the grandchildren. Slowly, carefully, we built a fragile bridge between us. I still didn't trust her with my finances, and probably never would again. The foundation had a board of independent trustees, and my personal assets were managed by professionals Rachel had no access to. But I could trust her to show up for lunch. I could trust her to respect my boundaries when I set them. I could trust that she was genuinely trying to change, even if that change was slow and imperfect. By the second year after I left her house, my life looked completely different. I had my own home, my own routine, my own community. I had meaningful work with the foundation, helping dozens of seniors fight financial exploitation. I had friendships old and new. I had a complicated but evolving relationship with my daughter. I had a loving, uncomplicated relationship with my grandchildren. Most importantly, I had myself back. The woman who had been slowly erased in service to others had returned, stronger and wiser than before. One evening, I sat in my small garden watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Robert Chen, the banker who had first warned me about the foundation idea, had become a friend. We occasionally had dinner together, sharing stories about our lives and work. "You seem happy," he observed. I thought about it. Was I happy? After everything that had happened, the betrayal and loss and struggle? "I am," I said, surprised to realize it was true. Not despite what happened, but maybe because of it. I learned what I'm capable of. I learned to set boundaries. I learned that love doesn't mean letting people hurt me. "That's wisdom," Robert said. "That's survival," I corrected. "Wisdom would have been learning it sooner." He smiled. Better late than never. Later that night, alone in my house, I looked through old photographs. Pictures of Rachel as a child, yes, but also pictures of me. Younger me, in my nurse's uniform, confident and capable. Me at my wedding, radiant with hope. Me holding newborn Rachel, exhausted but glowing. I had lost myself somewhere along the way, convinced that being a good mother meant disappearing into service. But I was finding myself again, reclaiming the woman I had been and discovering who I could become. The money Rachel stole and then returned now funded work that gave my life purpose. The pain she caused had taught me lessons I desperately needed. The distance she forced me into had given me space to rebuild. I wouldn't choose to go through it again. The betrayal still hurt when I let myself think about it too deeply. But I also wouldn't give back what I learned, who I became, what I created from the ashes. Have you ever experienced something like this? Have you felt used by family, manipulated by those you love, erased in service to others? Have you found the courage to reclaim yourself, even when it meant facing criticism and loneliness? If my story resonates with you, I hope you'll share your own experience in the comments below. And if this message helped you in any way, please consider liking this video and subscribing. These stories matter. Our experiences matter. Our healing matters. And sometimes, knowing we're not alone is the first step toward finding our way back to ourselves.